I think it's cool, like what Michael Saylor is doing. I think it's cool when people like that win and they show a lot of conviction. They go in like massively. I think everybody benefits from that, but it's not that interesting. Like Michael Saylor was already living a really good life before Bitcoin. He would have been living a good life after Bitcoin. But the thing that's interesting to me is seeing somebody who was sort of nihilistic, downtrodden, didn't think they could win, was like sort of psyoped, fat, sick, nearly dead, and who finds Bitcoin and it imbues them with this sort of spirit to begin an upward spiral in their life, to put one foot in front of the other. And I've seen that happen a lot. It's happened to me. And so I think it happens to everybody when they get here, because suddenly you have Bitcoin and you go, I have control over my own life in a way that's very meaningful to me. And I think that feeling is so powerful that I enjoy watching people go through it.
Let me tell you about the simplest and best way to start mining Bitcoin, the Blockware Marketplace. Our new streamlined onboarding process means you can literally buy a Bitcoin mining rig and start mining in under 60 seconds. All of the machines available for sale on the marketplace are online right now at one of Blockware's facilities. You don't have to worry about lead times or finding a place to get your machine plugged in. Blockware has already taken care of that for you. You get to mine completely hassle-free. And if at any point you decide that you no longer want to mine, or if the price of ASICs increases and you want to capitalize on the higher value of your machine, you can list your rig for sale at any time and at any price. This platform has completely changed the landscape of hosted Bitcoin mining. And the best part is that this all takes place using Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. Get started today at marketplace.blockwaresolutions.com.
Nowadays, people say this thing I hate. It's so cringe to me where they go, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. And you're like, actually, it does. I mean, that's the America I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s, bro. Yeah, that's what it meant. It meant we could all say whatever we wanted to, whenever we wanted to. And yeah, there were no consequences because it was our freedom. It was our First Amendment right. And it was a better world when we were living in that way. And we need to go back there. You know what I mean? Eminem was the most popular rapper saying the craziest shit. And everybody in the millennial generation just ate it up, And now,
Right.
like, you talk to the same people and they're like, Eminem's problematic. It's like, how about you shut the fuck up? I'm sick of these people,
Even Eminem himself, if you introduce old Eminem to the Eminem of today, he would be like, who is this loser?
Yeah, exactly. Like when he did that thing, it was like an anti-Trump like freestyle. I was like, gay. What is this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's crazy. So what do you think about Noster then? Because I might be in the minority among Bitcoiners. I think it's pretty much just like a circle jerk right now of Bitcoin maxis. And I don't know that it will ever be like massively used like a social media network. Like I don't know that you can overcome the network effects. All these Twitter clones have been tried before. So I'm not particularly bullish on it as a social media.
I said this on stage during the Noster panel at the Bitcoin conference, which is that basically they're going to come for Elon. Brazil already came for him, but I mean, the NATO countries are going to come for him as well. And when they do come for him, I mean, there was a British police chief who was kind of, it seemed like he was intonating that he was going to arrest Elon for memes, like try to extradite Elon and arrest him in the UK for memes. Like he's an American citizen. So like, there's no way that's ever going to fly. But just the fact that people are saying things about him like that, or there's this guy, Robert Reich, who's used to be Clinton's, like one of Clinton's economic advisor guys. He's like a Twitter communist. And he wrote some article in the Guardian about how we should, be arresting Elon Musk. And here are the ways in which we can do it, yada, 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 appealing to like this supranational cabal of, like WEF globalist or whatever. So I just think that, I like X and I like X post Elon. I like the freedom of speech. I like that he's shifted the Overton window to allow right-wing opinions to not be shadow banned. I was constantly shadow banned, like, when I was on there a few years ago. But the problem is it's too centralized. It's too fragile. They're going to come for Elon. And when they do, Noster is the credible backup plan. So that's what Noster is. And yeah, right. You're right. Right now, it's a bunch of Bitcoiners kind of circle jerking and talking about Noster and talking about Bitcoin. But, as somebody who's been around Bitcoin since the early days, it's like Well, I mean, that's what Bitcoin was. It was just a bunch of Bitcoiners circle jerking and talking about Bitcoin.
Right.
It's not. We've never been very friendly to normal people. Like we always have been
Yeah.
very like
Still
insular.
is kind of.
Yeah, we've always been very insular and weird and autistic and libertarian and anarcho-capitalist and like all sorts of things that normal people don't align with. And yet Bitcoin has just continued to grow in terms of importance and network effects. So I think Noster is in that camp for me. And also it's just like, it's really hard to be bearish on anything that Bitcoiners are doing. Period, full stop. Like if I know that you're a good Bitcoiner and I think you're a smart, capable, competent guy and you tell me you have a project, no matter what the domain is, I already in my mind have like, oh yeah, that's probably going to be successful. Or if he's doing something interesting, that's something I might want to pay attention to. Like 2-3 years ago when all the guys started talking about like seed oils or whatever, I
Yeah.
didn't dig into any of the research about seed oils. I just kind of was like, you know what? These are all smart Bitcoin guys I trust. I bet they've done their research, and I bet seed oils actually are as bad as they say they are. And then, like more recently, I've gone down the rabbit hole myself and realized that yeah, no, all the guys that were telling me 3 years ago, they're totally right. These things are poisoning us, and they're probably the reason for the testosterone crisis, the obesity epidemic. I mean, it's pretty crazy, right? So like, it's in general, I would say don't fade Bitcoiners. Whenever you see Bitcoiners doing something, just I wouldn't fade that.
Yeah, I think that's sage advice. And my mind immediately came to seed oils too, because I still remember it was Chair Force HODL. I don't think he's too active on Twitter much these days, but he seed oil pilled me about 3 years ago. My life has gotten immediately better, but I didn't like do any of my own research. I was like, Chair Force is a hardcore Bitcoiner. I trust him on this. I'm just gonna, go all in on the no seed oil thing.
Yeah, it's so funny. My wife is always making fun of me because she's like, oh yeah, what's it, what niacin, or now you're not wearing sunglasses, or you don't do sunscreen anymore, or you're like anti seed oils, whatever. Like, what is? Oh, it's all Bitcoin Twitter. Like, what did Bitcoin Twitter tell you to do like this week or whatever? And I'm like, listen, like, babe, you're making fun of me, and I get it, but like, I'm also the same guy who put our entire net worth into Bitcoin in 2014. So I have a good track record here. I tend to be right about these things, and a lot of my friends who are in this space also tend to be right about these things. So I'm gonna just left curve. Listen, this is the thing is like you should never mid curve it. Always left curve it. Don't right curve it unless you're like actually that guy. Just left curve that shit and be like, I don't know, bro. Seed oils seem kind of bad. I'm gonna stop eating them. And if somebody's like, yeah, but what about? Do you have any peer reviewed data? You'd be like, no, I don't. I just choose not to eat them. So eat shit. I don't know. I don't owe you an explanation, bro.
Yeah, I'm a left curver myself. You mentioned being in Bitcoin since 2014, and I want to quote one of your tweets from recently. It says, "Hodling doesn't have to be perfect, just good enough." Can you describe what you mean by that and what it's been like hodling since 2014?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so that tweet came about based on conversations I was having with other friends who are OGs. So it's not just my experience, but it's the experience largely of every OG that when you get together, like at the beefsteak or whatever, and you're talking shit with each other, a lot of the stories center back on, bro, I can't believe I fucked up. I spent 100 Bitcoin on weed on the Silk Road. I fucking, I gambled away 100 Bitcoin. I did this, I did that, I did the other thing. And yet all of these guys are still very successful. They're doing very well. They've gotten wealthy off of Bitcoin. And in general, the heuristic here is most people show up in Epoch too late. And what I mean by that is like in 2012, I was like a Ron Paul guy. I was listening to like the Joe Rogan Experience back when it was like dangerous and crazy and insane. And like, I was fucking on whatever, Arrowhead and doing like, research chemicals and taking DMT and just all sorts of shit, like things that were way outside the norm. And I was always a libertarian, and like, I should have been in, and I heard about Bitcoin in 2011. I should have been in Bitcoin in 2011, but I knew enough to be dangerous, and I was hubristic, and I thought I knew a little bit about how like the Pirate Bay was, being attacked by people around the world, and I thought that Bitcoin was some sort of centralized server whack-a-mole, et cetera, et cetera. So it was my hubris that fucked me up there, and it was a few years later after Bitcoin had crashed in 2014 that I finally was like, okay, now I'm going to take the plunge and I'm going to get here. And then the other mistake that Bitcoiners make, so they show up in Epoch too late. And Epoch in Bitcoin time means 4 years. They show up 4 years too late. So like if you're class of 2017, you should have been here in 13. If you're class of 21, you should have been here in 17, et cetera, right? The other thing that Bitcoiners do is when they do get here, they fuck up their stack by an order of magnitude by being too bearish on Bitcoin, essentially. So the
Mm.
two cardinal like sins in Bitcoin are, number one, believing a shitcoin sales pitch. So if you're like, dude, Tron, it's so fast, like just really fast, and like it's gonna do things. And then IOTA, dude, it's got the tangle. It's a thing, man. Solana, it's the new Ethereum, whatever. If you believe any of that shit, you're about to get separated from your money, and quickly. And then the next mistake, the big cardinal sin, is not being bullish enough on Bitcoin. So these guys get here too late by one epoch, and then they stack too little by an order of magnitude. So like class of 13 should probably have 100 Bitcoin. Most of them are in the tens of Bitcoin. Class of like 17 should probably have tens of Bitcoin. Most of them are in the single digit Bitcoin. Class of 21 should have multiple single digits. Most of them are probably, just single digit or below single digit. And so that's the mistake you make is not going hard enough. You got to go hard when you first get here, especially now that Bitcoin has been de-risked, because this isn't 2012 anymore or 2015. Bitcoin is on the balance sheet of 40 corporations. Bitcoin is being promoted by BlackRock, right? Like Bitcoin is in a part of the presidential election. Like it's been de-risked in a significant way. So if you're late and you're showing up now and none of this had ever occurred to you and you're just going, oh my God, I got to get my hands on some Bitcoin. Yeah, you got to like really ante up if you want it to have the same multiplier effect for you in your life.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of the TradFi suit guys that are coming in are going to make those same mistakes?
Yeah, I think everybody makes those mistakes. I think there's a tuition you pay to be a Bitcoiner that's there's no escaping the cost of that tuition, that experiential tuition. And I think that so much so that I even believe that nation states will have to make these mistakes. So not only does it apply at the individual level, it also applies at the corporate level and it applies at the nation state level. And so I think that most corporations will shitcoin before they Bitcoin, because that tends to be something that people do. I think most corporations will fuck it by an order of magnitude. I think most corporations will be here too late. And I think all the same things for the nation states. I think most nation states will shitcoin. I think most nation states will get here too late. I think most of them will go too little on their treasury. All those things are going to play out,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're already seeing it with our favorite orange man, right? He came and spoke at the Bitcoin conference, but now, like last week, he launched like a DeFi NFT shitcoin thing. Like, you have any thoughts on that? Like, is that a disappointment to you?
I think Trump can't help himself. And also, if you know anything about Trump's business career, I think his risk to reward ratio is just fucking terrible all the time. I mean, if I was in his camp and I took one look at that deal, I would be like, dude, we have a fucking a Democrat controlled SEC chair in Gary Gensler who's been prosecuting this exact type of behavior. And you're going to just serve him up another conviction for yourself on a silver platter for what amount of money? Maybe you're going to earn $6 million. That's not that much. Like your DJT meme stock is already doing well enough and has put enough money in the coffers of your war chest. Please stop. Like that's what I would say to Trump. Like, please stop. Don't do this. You're retarded. With all respect.
Yeah. It sounds like his advising team is definitely there. They're trying to mid curve it, right? They should just be left curving it. Not very wise people around him.
I think the Sons are responsible. I don't think much of the rest of the Trump family. I don't think much of Eric or Don Jr. I don't think they're very significant people. I think Barron is interesting. In 20 years, I think in 20 years, Barron could be a force. He seems to have, from what we hear about him behind the scenes, nobody's heard him speak, but like he seems to be more intelligent, more on the Ivanka side of the spectrum and less on the Don Jr. side of the spectrum.
The physiognomy is in his favor too, because he's like 6'7", very stoic, chiseled jawline. I anticipate a lot from him in the future.
Oh, think about Barron. He's 6'7". He's a billionaire. He has the most famous last name in the world, and he's a blank slate. Like politically, that is like a just perfect. You couldn't ask for a better candidate. That's the things he needs to do to win are like he should go join the military and be special forces after college. And then he should spend like a few years in Europe fucking like, random like European models. But like we never hear from him. We just like he's on a yacht in Saint Tropez and he's with some like hot French chick. And then like we see a picture of him driving a vintage motorcycle, smoking a cigarette. And we're like, damn, this guy's cool and mysterious and shit. And then when he's like 39, 40, he starts popping up with his political opinions. And then, it's like a straight shot to the White House from
Right.
there.
Yeah. Hopefully he hears that and takes heed. So back to Bitcoin. How do you think about like quote unquote taking profits, right? Because if you're in Bitcoin for a few cycles and you see your bag appreciate, like what is your thought process there? Because obviously if you hold to the grave until you die, you're not actually experiencing that change in lifestyle of accumulating that wealth.
Totally. I think so. There's a set period of time in which you should do nothing but hodl. You really have not earned it yet, I think. And I think that period of time is like minimum 10 years. I remember when I first bought, I told myself, like, I'm going to give myself 10 years and I'm not going to touch my Bitcoin until that time. And now, it's been about 10 years and I do live off my Bitcoin, which means I sell a little bit of Bitcoin for life expenses. I don't sell in big chunks. I don't try and time tops. I take a little off as needed, like for monthly expenses, basically.
Right.
And that's it. And then I seek to reduce my lifestyle, and, not get out over my skis in terms of like, oh, the number says this much, so I can spend this much. I try and just live as cheap as possible while still maintaining a good life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I think that essentially you never want to be totally out of Bitcoin. You always want to have some Bitcoin. Probably you want to have access to, the ability to margin your Bitcoin so that you can run like a buy, borrow, die strategy, which is what, fancy rich people like Michael Saylor do. Especially as you get richer, I think those products and options will be available to you as a Bitcoiner. Right now, they're like kind of few and far between. There's not that many ways to margin against your Bitcoin or leverage against your Bitcoin, borrow against it. And so like we'll see more of those products come to market. I think more Bitcoiners will run like a buy, borrow, die strategy. And that'll be one way to sort of maintain your stack while still, you know, enjoying the fruits of your labor of your delayed
Right.
gratification.
Right. With that in mind, do you think we're going to get more 70% drawdowns in the future if we start seeing Wall Street and passive inflows coming into Bitcoin? Because that would be the one thing that could really hurt the buy, borrow, die is if there's a massive drawdown and you get margin called.
Yeah. I think definitely we are going to see that. I think we are going to see those drawdowns. And I think you're going to have to be prepared. So like what I would do is like, hopefully you're in a position where your lifestyle and your stack size you don't need to take your entire stack size. You don't need to margin your entire stack in order to have the lifestyle that you want to have. Hopefully
Right.
your expectations are reasonable and your lifestyle is reasonable. But if you're like, I don't know, like doing really fancy shit, like you're drinking 30K of wine every month or something or whatever, like you got some weird rich guy stuff going on. Like I can't vouch for you. I don't know how that's going to work out for you. But yeah, I mean, just in general, I think you should margin a very small portion of your stack, probably 10% or less, so that if you do get into trouble, you're still 90% intact, right? Like you should be scared of leverage when it comes to Bitcoin. A lot of people, there's a great, I
Yeah.
think Francis Pouliot created this quote, which was, people believe that leverage is a time machine to being an OG, and it's not. And I think that's an important mental model for people to keep in mind, which is you can't go back to 2011, can't go back to 2016. You just can't. And leverage is not going to get you back there. If you try and increase your stack size by like 2 orders of magnitude more than you should, you're probably going to get wrecked unless you're really smart and really lucky in tandem. So yeah, be wary of leverage, be wary of these debt. I mean, essentially, like the more you have to interoperate as Bitcoiners, the more we have to interoperate with the fiat system, the traditional system, the more uncomfortable it should make us. It makes me more
Yeah.
uncomfortable, right? Because you just don't know the games that are being played, and there's a lot of games that are being played at your expense.
Yeah, dude, I totally feel that way because when I buy Bitcoin and send it to cold storage, it's like second nature. And the other day I was just like browsing like minor call options, not with any significant portion of my net worth, but I'm like, man, there's just so much more risk here and it feels a lot more shady. And I just don't know what's going on because they can pull all these levers. It's just, I prefer to be native to Bitcoin.
100%. And I have a little bit of a levered position myself, like a very small levered position myself. But again, it's way under. It's like 5% of my total stack. And if I did lose it, it would suck. It would not be a good day, but I would still be okay. I would be fine. You know.
So you're an OG Bitcoiner. You've been around since 2014. What keeps you from not just going and screwing off in the woods? Like, what keeps you interacting and engaging with the Bitcoin community on a regular basis?
Yeah, man. I mean, honestly, like for me, the thing has always been, I think it's cool, like what Michael Saylor is doing. I think it's cool when people like that win and they show a lot of conviction. They go in like massively. I think everybody benefits from that, but it's not that interesting. Like Michael Saylor was already living a really good life before Bitcoin. He would have been living a good life after Bitcoin. It's interesting in a historical sense because he might end up being the wealthiest man in the world.
Yeah.
But the thing that's interesting to me is seeing somebody who was sort of nihilistic, downtrodden, didn't think they could win, was like sort of psyoped, fat, sick, nearly dead, and who finds Bitcoin and it imbues them with this sort of spirit to begin an upward spiral in their life, to put one foot in front of the other. And I've seen that happen a lot. It's happened to me. And so I think it happens to everybody when they get here because suddenly you have Bitcoin and you go, I have control over my own life in a way that's very meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And I think that feeling is so powerful that I really just I enjoy watching people go through it and I like helping people figure it out. I don't know that I've been super effective like in real life. I think most of the people I've attempted to orange pill from my prior life didn't appreciate it, didn't want to hear the
Yeah.
message, weren't ready, weren't interested, etc. But people I find on the internet like are, and so it feels validating to me. And so yeah, that just keeps me coming back because really life is about other people and like you could be alone on a private island and shit, but it's not going to be that interesting or that cool or that exciting, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. People are definitely real wealth. And I've had similar experiences in my 3 or 4 years in Bitcoin. It's like the people I talk to in real life, none of them get it. They're not on board. So to actually confirm that I wasn't crazy, I got on Bitcoin Twitter and I figured out, all right, there are other people who see the same thing that I do.
Totally.
Yeah.
100%.
You tweeted recently too that doomerism is a psyop. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, man, I feel like when we were kids, maybe you don't remember this, how old are you, Mitch?
24.
24. Okay. So you were born in 2000? What the fuck?
Yeah.
No, bro, that's not a real age. You're still a zygote. No, I mean, even in the early 2000s, you probably remember it up into, I would say you probably remember it until you were about 14 or so, that like 14 or 15, that like American exceptionalism was kind of the norm.
Yeah.
And that was how people thought and acted and believed and behaved. And I still believe all those things from the 90s and the early 2000s. And this new thing where we're all supposed to act like America's horrible and evil and racist and the worst thing that's ever happened to the world by the numbers, like some sort of Noam Chomsky bullshit. I just don't believe at all. I think America is the most sort of beneficent force as far as nation states go that we've ever seen, right? Like, I mean, America had the atomic bomb at the end of World War II, and Europe lay in rubble. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like if that had happened to Russia, they would have just gone around enslaving the rest of the world, right? But we rebuilt Europe and we democratized nuclear technology. And so I mean, the democratization of nuclear technology was sort of happenstance and accidental. But anyway, besides the point, like the point is that I think America is a net good. I think being an American is a net good. I'm an American patriot. I believe in America. I live here. I'm not going to go live on some fucking tiny Caribbean island because that's just
Yeah.
so weird and defeatist. And I don't even know where that thought comes from. It sounds like pedophile shit, honestly. Like, I mean, it's just
Yeah.
like, what is that? I don't even know. Like, we're going to go to St. Kitts? Why? What's in St. Kitts? The fuck is there? Nothing. We're going to stay
Yeah.
here. The Citadel's America, you know?
Yeah.
If
I appreciate
we
that
can't
because
win America, we can't win.
all these people running off to El Salvador as if this is like the next bastion of freedom and hope is kind of laughable to me because it's still America at the end of the day.
And listen, man, I'm very happy for the El Salvadorian people. And I hope that Bitcoin continues to do what it's beginning to do in their society. And I think sometimes you do need like a dictatorial force, like a Nayib Bukele.
Yeah.
That said, though, I'm not El Salvadorian. El Salvador is a tiny nation that doesn't have a lot of geographic wealth or resources, and I'm not very interested in going there. Um, so I wish them luck, but I'm an American, so I care about American things.
Right. I saw a tweet the other day. It was like, if you just go outside and get off the internet, it's still 2005 out in the real world.
Yeah,
And it's so
that's fair.
true. And I think a lot of this nihilism is just native to the internet. And I don't know if the algorithms just push that or what, but I don't really see that doom or black pill mentality as much out in meat space.
Well, it's because think about it. Like the internet is just feeding you every horrible thing from every corner of the world. Suddenly, you're like having thoughts and opinions about Mumbai street crime. No offense to the people of Mumbai, but you probably shouldn't give a fuck as a person who lives in like North Carolina. The fuck
Yeah.
does Mumbai street crime mean to you? Nothing.
Yeah.
Um, there's this idea that we're all citizens of the world, so we should all care or whatever. But like the truth is, like the average person, you don't have the ability to care much outside of your local, your family, your community, your church. That's about it. And
Yeah.
that's all anybody is asking of anybody. Like that's enough, by the way. You don't need to sort of be some Captain Save-A-Ho, Mother Teresa out here trying to save the entire world because it's impossible anyway.
Yeah, it is. And that's how I feel when people are talking about, oh, are you Russia or Ukraine? Or are you Israel or Palestine? I'm like, I'm
Yeah, who
American.
cares?
I don't
Yeah.
care about these other situations. I want what's good for Americans, and I wish that the American government would function in the best interest of Americans.
Yeah, we feel absolutely the same way. And I think sometimes people, think about America's foreign policy as if it doesn't affect us, as if there isn't some psychic cost for what we're doing. Like, you know, I heard people give all these economic reasons for like the Ukraine war. And they're like, we have to do it because it's helping us get rid of our old stockpile of weapons and build up a new arsenal and everything. And it's like, that's okay. I can buy that from an economic standpoint. But then at the same point, it's like, if you look at that war, it's basically like eroding Ukrainian society because all of the good men have gone off to the meat grinder in order to be slaughtered by a
Right.
superior enemy. Russia is just, there's no world in which that war ends without Russia taking territory. In my opinion, like it's the best you can do is fight Russia back to a stalemate, and then what's to stop them from trying again? So I don't know. It seems like a waste of resources. I understand there's like geopolitical importance with it. But when people try and get you riled up about like Israel Palestine, for instance, on the other side of the coin, it's like, what does that have to do with us? Other than the fact that we seem to be funding both sides of it for
Yeah.
reasons that are unknown to me. But like back here at home, what the hell? That's a holy war. What the hell does a holy war have to do with us in America?
Yeah.
You know?
Very little. So, do you think a Bitcoin standard stops war? Period.
No, no. I mean, I would like it to. I wish that it was codified libertarianism. I wish that it stopped war, but we had wars on a gold standard, you know.
Yeah.
And in general, like there's a period of time where when you create inflation, you can run a deficit in order to finance your war, and that period is usually like 4 to 5 years. If you look at like when the Nazis were blitzing Europe and taking over, that period was mainly financed by inflation,
Hmm.
and it lasts about 4 or 5 years. And so, I mean, that there's always going to be dictators who want to do war, and they're always going to be able to finance it via inflation. And at the same time, it's like I don't see the mechanism that's inherent to Bitcoin that destroys fiat currency. I
Hmm.
think Bitcoin supplants fiat currency, but I don't know that it destroys it. And I think most nation states on Earth will probably put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, issue stable coins against Bitcoin, the dollar backed by Bitcoin. And then at some point they'll break the peg because that's what they do. And
Yeah.
it's a like couple 100-year cycle, and it'll repeat all over again. And by the time it happens, the peg gets broken again. The people that are alive won't have been alive to learn any of the lessons, so they won't feel any of the pain, and they'll get all of the temporary pleasure and enjoyment from breaking the peg, and the consequences won't come due until after they're dead. And so it's
Yeah.
like they're gonna do it for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a good deal. You get to party while you're here on Earth. Somebody else pays the tab, and nobody ever holds you to account for it. fantastic deal. Like I would take that deal all day long. I think everybody would. And you're lying to yourself if you say you wouldn't. And I don't see a way for us to get away from that instinct in humanity.
Yeah, that seems to be the cycle, right? It's like people who experience the negative consequences of whether it be fiat money or just socialist price controls, they die off, and then the new people on Earth weren't alive to remember how devastatingly bad it was, and so you just have it again.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I
100%.
get, yeah, a
That's
Bitcoin
kind of like
standard
the
isn't.
the fourth turning theory, right? It's like,
Yeah,
it's everything's in our historical blind spot essentially, which I think is true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it's the end of the world if Kamala Harris gets elected, or is it the end of the world for Bitcoin in the United States?
I think it says something very negative about the American people. I think it says that the American people are capricious, and that they're asleep and they're brainwashed and they're lazy and they're willing to accept outright fraud and corruption and graft. They don't believe in American ideals. I mean, there's a lot of things I could go on about if Kamala wins that I don't think are very. I mean, think about it like this, Mitch. Like, who voted for Kamala? Nobody. And she's a puppet that was put in there by the same oligarchs, the nameless, faceless, bureaucrats that are running the country right now, while Joe Biden is off at a Delaware beach in
Right.
Rehoboth somewhere or whatever.
I keep
You know,
forgetting
the,
he's president.
right? Like, yeah, he doesn't even act like he's president. That man is in charge of the nuclear arsenal. He could pick up a phone and destroy any country on earth. And we're just like, yeah, he's got dementia and he's crazy. It is what it's like. I don't know, man. I mean, I hope Kamala doesn't win. I hope Trump wins because if Trump wins, it says the opposite. It says we still care about American values. We still care about our culture. We're not willing to accept corruption. Um, I don't know though. We're gonna have to play it out to see because half the country seems to be totally asleep and brainwashed, and like whatever the television tells them, they just openly believe it.
Yeah.
And then you got the other half of the country who's like totally rejected all of the ideas that are coming out of MSNBC, which they rightly should, but then they're susceptible to capture on the conspiracy side where they believe every single conspiracy that's ever been told to them because the
Right.
mainstream narrative is such bullshit, and it is such bullshit. So you can see how it's easy to come to those conclusions.
Right. Right. I I'm optimistic that I don't think it'd be the end of the world, at least not for me, right? Because I'm better off now objectively than I was 4 years ago, even though Biden was in office, right? I think it
Yeah.
all comes down to the individual and how you respond to the environment around you.
I think as a young guy, it's good that you feel that way, and it gives me hope that you feel that way because if you didn't feel that way, I would be worried that you were amotivational.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially when you're in your early 20s, like, bro, you couldn't tell me nothing. Like I was set on my goals, and I was going to do whatever the fuck I was going to do, no matter what was happening in the world. And anybody who's a young male who's like, oh, I can't succeed because of Kamala Harris. It's like we need to probably get his testosterone checked and
Yeah.
just make sure he doesn't have too many microplastics in his blood.
No, most of them definitely do. I feel like I'm in the
They do.
minority.
They do.
Yeah. So I got one more question for you. This
Yeah.
one is very serious. Is sideways price action at 58K for months on end? Is this max pain? And how many more months of this do you kind of expect?
I would say that this is normal. I have the same feeling I had in 2016 during the election year. I had the
Mm-hmm.
same feeling I had in 2020 during the election year. And now I have the same feeling in 2024. It always feels like this right before things get really bullish.
Mm-hmm.
There's some stuff happening in the macro backdrop, but I mean, they're about to cut rates again. And like, I think we're going to see more monetary stimulus. I think we're going to see lower rates. And I think those things are going to propel Bitcoin. And then at the same time, you got, all the institutional buy-in on Bitcoin this time around. So like for me, I'm still bullish going into 25. And I think 25 should be a pretty bullish year. If we go sideways like through the entirety of 25, that would be kind of painful. But
Yeah.
also, I mean, it would give you a lot of time to stack if you're a new stacker. And if you're an OG, like, well, $58,000 Bitcoin is just fine. If you bought your Bitcoin at $1,000, you got a
Yeah.
58x there. Like you're doing pretty good. Yeah, I don't. I don't think it's a Max Payne scenario to just go sideways at 58K. I To me it feels like nothing, but I also
Mhm.
understand that I've been around for a while, and so I'm kind of deadened to some of these emotions. I think probably what people should expect though is there will be an opportunity, I think, before the end of the year or before like the end of the first quarter of next year, in order to stack really cheaply. That usually happens. There's usually some panic moment,
Mhm.
and you get one last crack at it, one last opportunity. And if that does occur, I don't think you should like save up your dry powder for that, expecting it to come. I would probably DCA in,
Yeah.
but I would maybe save up a little, and I would, if I see that opportunity, I would go all in because it probably will arise.
Yeah. I was expecting and hoping you'd give an answer like that. I've been in Bitcoin since late 2020, and as long as I can remember, it's either, up or down, right? This kind of sideways action has me in agony. Like I just want to feel something. Like I don't care if we drop 20%. Just my emotions are so tied to this orange coin, and the last few months have just been very
The
uneventful.
the thing to remember is that most of Bitcoin's returns come on only 11 days of the year.
Yeah.
And so, in many ways, Bitcoin is a store of pain emotionally. And if you're going to be here for a long time, like, 10 years plus, you're going to you're going to burn yourself out if you're too emotional about it any one direction. But again, that's easier said than done because when you're young and you're putting a lot of money in, and it's meaningful to you. And because I remember feeling like $100,000 was fucking so much money. It was all the money in the world, and like to put that into Bitcoin felt like, ugh. I remember in what 18, the price went to 6,600 and it stayed there for a long time. And I was like, oh, okay, this is probably a good place to buy. And I put in a very large slug of money, six figures, low six figures, and which to me at the time was like a shitload of money. And I put it in, and the price immediately collapsed 50%. And I was like, all right. And then I took all the money in my account, all the liquid cash I had to my name at that point, and when it went to 3,300, whatever, I just bought everything. And then I
Yeah.
took a walk around the block, um, telling myself like over and over again in my head, like, you're the stupidest person ever. You're so fucking stupid. You're gonna lose all your fucking money. You're a fucking idiot. Fucking idiot. You're so dumb. Whatever. And then by the end of the walk, I had convinced myself, I was like, no, you just did the right thing. You did a good thing. That was the right thing to do. You got this, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, the emotions are tough, man, and you got to fade yourself, and you got to be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. That's the key.
Yeah. Wise advice. And I found that walks have a way of enlightening, right? When you just
Yeah,
walk around, especially if you're in a panicked mode or if you just can't think, like there's something psychedelic about walks.
yeah. Do you know what? There's a type of therapy. I think it's called rapid eye movement desensitization or something like EDM.
Hmm.
Something something. That's based on the clinician who invented that. Basically, it's like they have you look at you doing therapy and you're reliving like a past trauma or whatever, and you're looking around at like different dots on the screen. The physician or clinician who created that was going on a walk, and they just
Hmm.
realized that as they scanned the environment, they felt better. And I mean, of course, there's an evolutionary pressure to that, right? Where if you're scanning the environment and you don't see any predators, you feel good, you know,
Right.
because you're like,
Right.
oh, nobody's gonna fucking eat me, you know.
That makes a
It's
lot of
like
sense.
makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, Hodl, I appreciate you taking the time to do this, man. I know you're a busy guy with your wife and kids and everything, so I really
Of course,
appreciate it.
bro.
Do you have anything you want to plug to the audience?
No, I'll plug Noster. You
Yeah.
should all have a Noster account as a backup, even if you're not bullish on it, just as a fucking backup, bro. And also, when Bitcoiners tell you they're doing shit, just believe them that it's cool. Like Ben Justman makes wine, and he's a Bitcoiner, and I bought some of his wine, and it was fucking great. Or
Yeah.
like, yeah, or like you were talking about your sponsor, Sovereign, who makes energy drinks, and they're fucking
Awesome.
yeah, they're fucking great. Apparently, I haven't had one, but Sovereign, if you want to hook me up, let me know. Okay,
They
but
definitely will.
like yeah, like I've met Bitcoiners who make fucking hot sauce and whatever. So like when Bitcoiners are making their own decentralized social media, that is something to pay attention to, and definitely you should be a part of it. You don't have to spend every day there, you know what I mean? But let's be honest, like people who are like, it's a circle jerk, bro. What do you guys talk about on Twitter other than Bitcoin anyway? Like
Yeah.
fucking, that's all we talk about.
Yeah, that's a great point. In pubs in the description. Make sure to hit us up on Noster, everybody. Really appreciate it, Hodl.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.